Hi everyone. For this in-class video, we are going to be focusing on the lesson assessment and the instructional sequence for our lesson plan as guided by the EDUC371April23v1 planning commentary, assessment task, and instructional task. So we have a lot of handouts to go through today. Take it slow, pause if you need to, work on stuff. So this is meant to be part of our class period time, quote unquote. So you can take a pause, work on something, and resume the video as you need to. The first thing that we're going to focus on is using assessments to monitor student learning. So we're going to take a look at Planning Commentary Part 5, which is due for next class period. We're going to start brainstorming some assessments that might work to check for understanding during and after our lesson, and we're also going to look over the assessment task document from EDUC371April23v1. After that, we'll move on to the instructional task document that you will be using after your teaching, but it really focuses on helping you think through what student engagement might look like and how you will help your students make meaning from the text. So even though you won't be writing on this document until after your teaching, we want to preview it a little bit because it has some important information. First, back to the planning commentary. Based on the work that I see submitted on Thursday for parts 3 and 4, we might go back and take a little bit deeper look into what that student support could possibly look like and what supporting language arts development through language might mean. So I mentioned in class that I might post another video in the afternoon looking at guiding you through revising your lesson plan a little bit more. And if I see the need to focus on these stages, I'll take some time to do that in that video. Hopefully, as you watch this video, you already have a general idea of what it would look like to fill out that lesson plan template, or you've started already filling it out. If not, you might want to take a minute to do that. Okay, so as you filled out your lesson plan template, you also maybe noticed that there is this assessment part right next to the objectives there, which is because your assessments should be connected to your objectives. I'm sure you all know that. So one thing that the planning commentary asks you to do is to describe how you plan formal and informal assessments. So that's something to consider as you look at that assessment section in the lesson plan template. Is have you listed both formal and informal assessments, different checks for understanding? Is there a time where you'll walk around the room and see what students have highlighted, where you'll call on students in class? And then for the formal ones, what are they going to actually turn into you that day in order for you to see where they're at in their learning? And remember, the assessments do need to see students constructing meaning from or responding to a complex text. And this is for the EDUC371 and student teaching throughout the learning segment. So they're saying that as you collect assessments, you could collect an assessment after 3 or 4 days, but it should show how they've been learning throughout the 3 or 4 day learning segment. We're just focusing on one day. So we're just focusing on assessments for that day. And again, they have this design or adaptation of planned assessments. So that's something that you can look at based on student needs, whether they're ELL students or they have IEP or 504s. Is there a way that you could adjust your assessments to potentially fit with their needs, their specific needs? You could also think about students who are gifted. Is there a way that you could ask them to stretch themselves or push themselves with your assessment? So just a little brainstorming here about what adaptations you might potentially make. So again, take a minute, and if you haven't yet done this, go ahead and fill it out. It is due next class period. This expands upon and further explains your ideas for both formal and informal assessments through your one lesson. So each lesson that we give can have a formal assessment, and we will be required to have a formal assessment, but it could also have some informal assessment checks as you work through the class period. You will not be filling out task 3, the assessment commentary, until after you do your online teaching. So you're going to do a little online micro teaching, as I mentioned last class period. But it would be good for you to look through this document to see what it's going to ask you to think about as you analyze student learning from the assessment that you give the students feedback, check their use of language understanding and how they're using their language, and then your plans moving forward based on the assessment you get. Next thing we will briefly look at is this Task 2 instruction commentary. This, as well as the assessment commentary, you do not have to do until after you've done your teaching segment. So the EdTPA is going to ask you to submit video clips of your teaching and evaluate that. We will just be using the online teaching that you do because we can record and you can discuss your ideas based on the clip of your actual teaching. So for this, one thing that I also want to highlight is for our uses, I would like to see honest reflection. So for some of these questions, you might say, okay, so I did this, but my lesson didn't actually help students, and here are the reasons why, and here how I would change my lesson. And so this is something where we can be honest and allow ourselves to admit our mistakes. Now, when you do the EdTPA in the future, they sometimes give exceptions for if lessons just absolutely blow up because we aren't always in control of the classroom or the situation. So the thing that you want to think about when you actually do that for student teaching is making sure that your lesson segment does have quality segments of teaching that you can show, yes, I did engage students, I did deepen their learning, I did push them to extract meaning from a text. But for our sake, do the best you can. If you make a mistake, it's okay, we're practicing. So I wanted to show you this now because I think it will help inform you as you plan out what you are going to include in the engagement section of the lesson plan template and the procedure of your instructional sequence. So this part B, describe how your instruction linked to students' prior academic learning, personal, cultural, and community assets. That's something that you can just kind of practice through as you look at what we, as your students, we have natural assets for constructing meaning from a text, or we maybe have familiarity with the genre more than students that you would teach in the future. But you can talk a little bit about that. The main one that I want you to focus on is how your instruction engaged students. So that is a part of the lesson plan template. And remember, this is looking at active learning. So students taking time to dig into the content or the task that they're given and use that. So this is why we're using ideas from Teach Like a Champion, why I wanted you to take some time to read that now, because they focus on what are the things that teachers do to engage students in learning. In our case, constructing meaning from, interpreting, or responding to a complex text. I also added one more post or thread to our Teach Like a Champion chapters 3 and 4 that directs you to a teaching channel video with something called the 136 protocol. If you got the username and password, it's this, because some of you maybe watched a teaching channel video from a different class. Basically, I want you to watch that video and see how students are being engaged in the learning in that video. And we're going to watch a couple more throughout next week to help us really solidify what will student engagement look like in my lesson. Maybe I know the method that I want to use to teach them, but I'm not sure what that engagement will look like. And so that's, I'm going to ask you to do that so that we can further think about student engagement as we approach teaching the lesson that we have planned. Part 4, deepening student learning. There are also some videos on the teaching channel that show this building on student response and referring them back to text that we can watch. And Teach Like a Champion actually talks about this a lot and shows some good examples and even some back and forth about, okay, what answer did the student give? How did the teacher push them farther? How did the teacher engage other students while one student was giving answers? And so that's where we can use the ideas from Teach Like a Champion to build out our lesson sequence in our lesson plan template to work towards deepening student learning. So again, I wanted to walk through those 2 documents that you'll fill out afterwards so you can see the criteria you will be asked to comment on. So you can use that criteria to more thoughtfully develop your assessment tools and procedures. Consider how you will use student engagement and research-based best practices, and build out your procedure, especially in the instructional sequence of this lesson plan template. And based on the planning commentary part 3 and 4 work that I see submitted on Thursday, I'll be posting another video with some thoughts and ideas of how we can continue developing our lesson plans thoughtfully and according to the criteria of the EDTPA, which you will be using during student teaching. Remember, this is methods class. We're allowed to mess up, make mistakes, revise, do our best, learn from where things didn't work. So do not think that this lesson has to be perfect. Do not think that your micro teaching needs to be perfection. It's time to try something out based on research and what you think will engage students with a text. Do your best, and I look forward to seeing your work.